Shut up and sit down.
Welcome back to the backyard, everyone. I'm your host, Coleman Swartz. Just like the title says, we're back for episode 4 of Colemanoscopy. Today is going to be semi-serious, as it's something that I think needs to be said. With all the uncertainty going on in our country, I started to do what I think a lot of people should do. The last couple of weeks, I've been thinking on it, praying on it, and talking to people who have experienced things different from me. And I've been learning. And I wanted to learn even more. So I've been reading and learning about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., led the civil rights movement back in the 60s. And I would encourage you to go read arguably one of the greatest speeches that's ever been given in the history of this country. That is the I Have a Dream speech, 1963. He did it in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. And we've all seen the clips, right? We've seen the short snippets of it, but have you ever actually read the words? Listen to the whole thing. It is, it's quite something to read the whole thing. And what he said back then in 1963 is still very relevant today. And yes, we have made much progress since then, but we still have a lot to go. And that's what I wanted to present to you today. I'm going to read the speech. I have the transcript here, and I'm going to read it. If you make it all the way through, terrific. If not, no big deal. But I'd like for you to listen to the words. I'd like for you to think about what he was saying then and how they influence what's happening now. So here's the speech. I'm going to pull it up. And we're going to, obviously I'm not nearly as good as a speaker as Dr. King, but I'm going to give it a go. So here's the speech. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light to millions of African-American slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to the end of a long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the African-American is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the African-American is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the African-American lives live on a lonely island of poverty in the vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the African-American is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own lands. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as their citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the African-American people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and the desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the African Americans' legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the African American needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the African American is granted citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there's something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with the soul force. This marvelous new militancy, which has engulfed the African American community, must not lead us to distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And we have to come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the African American is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the African American's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs that state, "For whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as an African American in Mississippi cannot vote and an African American in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of created suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and the ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little girls will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join the hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of our Lord shall be revealed, and the flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out in the mountains of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nations into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightened Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill in Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happen, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let freedom ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that the day of all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the word of the old African American spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. I don't know if you made it this far or not. I appreciate you if you did. Those are some of the most powerful words that have ever been spoken. And I want you, in the climate of today, to look at those words. Find it. Just Google it. Read the text and think about what he is saying. Think about how it translates into today. And think about how we can all be better. So I know we can be better. It starts with me. It starts with me raising my kids, my family. It starts with how I interact with people. And then it goes from there. If we all just treat each other like we want to be treated ourselves, we can make the necessary changes that are needed. I appreciate you for watching. If you've made it this far, I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you have a wonderful summer, a wonderful year. And I hope you were able to do so with the harmony within yourself and the feeling that you're doing all you can to make the world a better place. Appreciate you all. Have a good night.
Shut up and sit down.